5 military air bases successfully hit, 15 military aircraft destroyed, over $1 billion in damages inflicted on airbase and aviation infrastructure. According to Ukraine's Security Service, or SBU, that's how much carnage its Alpha Special Forces group inflicted on Russia's Aerospace Forces, or VKS, during 2025 alone. For Russian President Vladimir Putin, that's got to hurt. But to make matters worse for him, there are signs that replacing these losses is going to be easier said than done. In particular, ongoing problems at the giant Tupolev aircraft company indicate a growing crisis in delivering orders of the key strategic bombers and dual-use airliners that it produces. So let's dive into the two stories and unpack what they tell us about the state of Russia's Air Force as a result of Ukraine's attacks and the military-industrial complex that builds it. To be clear, the Russian losses claimed by the SBU are far from the only losses imposed on Russia's military aviation machine. They're just the work of the SBU's Alpha unit, and just in 2025. And, as we'll reveal later in the video, it's also likely to be just a fraction of their total contribution to Russian losses. SBU Alpha Group, formerly known as the Special Operations Center A of the SBU, is one of Ukraine's most elite Tier 1 Special Operations units. They're the Ukrainian equivalent of the US's Delta Force and SEAL Team 6, or the UK SAS. And much like their illustrious counterparts, the unit specializes in counter-terrorism, direct action, hostage rescue, high-value target operations, special reconnaissance, and sabotage. For the highest-risk missions behind Russian lines, Alpha typically gets the call. The unit was formed in 1994 and has been actively engaged in the Russo-Ukrainian War since 2014, participating in key battles like those for Hostomel, Kharkiv, Bakhmut, and the Kursk offensive of 2024-2025. Alpha played a critical role in ambushing Russian convoys near Kyiv in 2022 and claims to have eliminated over 9,500 Russian troops and destroyed thousands of enemy assets in the battle for Pokrovsk alone. According to SBU Colonel and Secretary of the Government's Committee on National Security, Defense and Intelligence, Roman Kostenko, by mid-2025, Alpha was responsible for eliminating roughly 10% of enemy targets out of all of the defense forces, both on the front line and behind enemy lines. In recognition of their strategic importance, he introduced a bill to rapidly expand the size and capabilities of Alpha in the Verkhovna Rada, the Ukrainian parliament. The bill, which expanded the size of the unit from a few thousand to 10,000 and granted its troops the legal right to use all types of weaponry in accordance with their assigned missions, was adopted in July 2025. A large part of the reason why Alpha received this upgrade is the undisputed leadership of its kamikaze FPV drone crews, especially in deep strike operations such as Operation Spiderweb. This legendary operation, which took place the month before the Alpha's upgrade, involved a sneak attack on Russian air bases from inside Russia. The SBU had smuggled drone components into Russia, assembled and loaded the drones into the backs of specially constructed trucks, and then launched them from nearby air bases, catching the Russians completely by surprise. On the one hand, this was an extremely risky move, one that risked a nuclear response. The target of the Ukrainian drones was Russia's strategic bomber fleet, which was standing in the open, unprotected, in keeping with the terms of the New START treaty between the US and Russia. The Nuclear Arms Control Treaty, which is set to expire shortly, requires that Russian and US strategic nuclear bombers be kept visible to the other side's satellites for verification purposes. On the other hand, Operation Spiderweb goes down as one of the most audacious, ingenious, and consequential asymmetrical attacks of this century, if not in history. The images and footage of burning Russian bombers at the supposedly untouchable Olenia, Belaya, and Ivanovo-Siverny air bases stunned the world. In the immediate aftermath of the attack, Ukrainian authorities claim to have put dozens of Russia's most highly valued aircraft out of action, many permanently. Euronews and other major Western media reported that a third of Russia's strategic bomber fleet had been destroyed. When the dust settled, Confirmed to have been damaged or destroyed across the 5 bases were 7 or 8 Tu-95 type bombers, 4 at Olenia and the remainder at Belaya, and 4 Tu-22M3 bombers at Belaya, along with the Antonov AN-12 transport plane at Olenia and 2 targeted Beriev A-50 airborne early warning and control planes at Ivanovo Severny. Financially speaking, if they're irrecoverable, the damage to the 2 A-50s would be the most painful for Russia, with each one estimated to cost around $350 million. More pertinently, there are fewer than 10 in active service, and they play a critical role in coordinating Russian air operations. So, losing a fifth of their fleet in one blow would be a disaster for Russia. Especially when you consider the issues Russia is experiencing with taking delivery of new planes, which we'll get to in a minute. The damaged or destroyed bombers cost significantly less than the A-50s, with the Tu-95M estimated at between $50 and $125 million, and the modernized Tu-22M3 at between $40 and $100 million respectively. Taking the upper bound values, that means the total cost of Operation Spiderweb to Russia, just in damage to aircraft alone, is around $2.1 billion. Now, that's significantly less than the $7 billion of damage originally claimed by Ukraine, but it's still a major bloody nose for the VKS. Assuming they were all taken out of action permanently, the 12 bombers hit during Operation Spiderweb likely account for around a tenth of Russia's strategic bomber fleet, not the mere third they claim. On the face of it, with a defense budget of over $160 billion, more than 30% of federal spending, earmarked for 2026, Russia has the cash to replace its destroyed bombers. However, actually getting his hands on replacement bombers, or any new bombers at all for that matter, is proving a much bigger problem for Putin than simply throwing rubles at it. For starters, both the Tu-95 in its original M variant, or the more modern MSM, and T-22M3 are Soviet-era planes, and Tupolev, the manufacturer, no longer produces new ones. So, when these bombers get removed from service, they cannot be replaced like for like. And speaking of hard to replace, this unique insight we provide every week here on the Military Show. So if you want more of it, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. The Tu-95 first flew in 1952 and continues to be Russia's primary long-range turboprop bomber. Despite its age, the aircraft's extended range, nuclear missile payload, and unmistakable propeller signature mean it remains central to Russian deterrence doctrine. The Russian Ministry of Defense began a comprehensive upgrade program in 2015 to extend the life of its remaining Tu-95 fleet into the 2040s. Each conversion into the Tu-95 MSM includes installing new NK-12 NPM engines, SOI O-21 phased array radar, navigation backed by GLONASS, Russia's GPS analog, digital cockpit screens, and KH-101 cruise missile launch modules. Each upgrade is estimated to cost around $50 million, and Russia is estimated to spend a further $3 to $5 million per aircraft every year for depot-level inspections, propeller balancing, corrosion control, crew training, and nuclear surety certification. That's in part due to the increasing difficulties and expenses associated with keeping the aged airframes in working order. Even before sanctions, spare parts for the NK-12 turboprop, still the world's most powerful turboprop, were scarce, and reversing cycle gearbox overhauls alone are estimated to exceed $2 million every 1,500 flight hours. Unprecedented economic sanctions following Russia's invasion of Ukraine have only sharpened the pain. For example, titanium and aluminum prices climbed 28% between 2020 and 2024, inflating skin panel replacement bills. As a result, many components are now cannibalized from stored airframes. Still, even at $50 million per refurbishment, the Tu-95 yields a favorable deterrent per dollar ratio for Russia. The Tu-95 is much cheaper to fly than the US's modern B-2 Spirit and forthcoming B-21 Raider strategic bombers, and even its older B-52 bombers, which are the Tu-95's contemporaries. Its 9,300-mile flight radius enables crews to launch stealthy Kh-101 cruise missiles from far outside enemy air defense envelopes, sidestepping the need for billion-dollar stealth airframes. Plus, Russia has long had the infrastructure in place for regular Tu-95 missions, with established runways at Engels II and Ukrainka air bases. Before the invasion, Russia was estimated to have around 50 active Tu-95s. It's understood to have subsequently lost between 7 and 10 in total during the war, leaving some 80% of the fleet intact. However, few of these are known to have already been through the upgrade process, which, as we shall see, is part of Putin's problem. And it's a similar story with the Tu-22M3. The Tu-22M3 evolved from earlier Tu-22M1 and M iterations. The Tu-22M1 first flew in July 1971, and the Tu-22M was first used in combat missions in Afghanistan between 1987 and 1989. The Tu-22M3 completed its first flight in 1977, was installed into inventory in 1983, and was first used by Russia for combat operations in Chechnya in 1995. The Tu-22M3 has a length of 139 feet, a maximum wingspan of 112 feet, a height of 36 feet, and a maximum empty weight and takeoff weight of almost 117,000 and 279,000 pounds respectively. It has a cruise speed of 559 miles per hour and a maximum speed of 1,429 miles per hour, and can fly at a maximum altitude of just under 46,000 feet, with an operational range of 4,350 miles. Capable of carrying nuclear missiles, it's an important part of Russia's nuclear deterrence, but Russia has also used it to fire conventional missiles at Ukraine. It can be armed with Kh-32 missiles, Kh-15 or Kh-15P anti-radar missiles, or the Fab glide bombs fitted with modern guidance modules that Russia has been using prodigiously to pound Ukrainian positions and settlements on the front lines. However, like the Tu-95, the bomber has needed significant upgrades to remain effective in modern warfare. In 2017, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced its intention to upgrade half of its 60 active Tu-22M3 to the advanced Tu-22M3M. The first modernized aircraft was launched at Tupolev's Kazan aviation plant not too long after, making its maiden flight on December 28, 2018. However, since then, and especially since Russia's invasion and the consequent onset of sanctions against it, progress has stalled dramatically. Russia is believed to have lost up to 9 during the war, with only a single further upgraded Tu-22M3s known to have been delivered in 2023. More worryingly for Putin, with production of new units no longer possible, it's unclear how many, if any at all, of the remaining 28 earmarked for upgrades will be upgraded in the future. The manufacturer, Tupolev, is clearly having great difficulty delivering on its commitments. At least that's what the growing number of lawsuits filed against it by the Russian Ministry of Defense and others suggests. The source of the issues seem to be production bottlenecks, due to insufficient capacity and manpower at Tupolev's gigantic Kazan aviation plant facility, KAZ for short. This is where the Tu-95 and Tu-22M3 upgrades are supposed to be taking place, alongside construction of new Tu-160M bombers, the third and most modern leg of Russia's strategic bomber tripod, and two Tu-14 dual-use civilian airliners. As the various lawsuits against the company reveal, the plant is failing to deliver any of the above on schedule. In May 2025, the Moscow Arbitration Court ruled on a case that had been brought against Tupolev by the Russian Ministry of Defense the previous summer. The suit had entered the court in January 2025 with an initial claim of 360 million rubles, about $4.7 million, subsequently increased to 3 billion rubles, around $40 million. Ultimately, the court ordered Tupolev to pay the 3 billion ruble amount, which, according to Russian media, is likely related to delays in delivering on its commitments. But that wasn't the first time the Russian MOD has taken Tupolev to court, or the last. In 2019, it went to court with a demand to recover 4.6 billion rubles, about $60 million, from Tupolev for violating aircraft repair deadlines. That time, the court only partially satisfied the claim, reducing the amount to 13 million rubles, a decrease from around $61 million to $172,000. Following the May 2025 ruling, in November, the MOD filed another lawsuit against Tupolev, seeking 930 million rubles, around $12.3 million, due to economic disputes over civil legal relations. Again, this case is almost certainly to do with Tupolev's failure to deliver on its commitments regarding bomber production on schedule. According to analysis by Ivan Kirichevsky, a serviceman in the 413th Regiment of the Ukrainian SBS Raid Unit and defense analyst, the 3.9 billion ruble total demanded by the Russian MOD will at best cover the cost of repairing or refurbishing a single Tu-95 MS. That suggests just how much trouble Tupolev is having delivering anything to the Russian armed forces. But their delivery issues don't end there. In addition to the MOD's lawsuits, Tupolev was sued twice in 2025 by oil and gas giant Tatneft for non-delivery of two Tu-114 aircraft for its airline UVT Aero. In 2022, the airline entered into contract for the supply of 4 Tu-114s produced at KAZ. The first 2 planes were to be delivered in October 2024, with the remaining 2 due in September 2025. However, the contract was not fulfilled. Tatneft filed a lawsuit against Tupolev and KAZ for 6.2 billion rubles, which is around $80 million respectively. The parties postponed the case several times in an attempt to conclude a settlement agreement, but ultimately, in the summer of 2025, the arbitration court of Tatarstan partially satisfied the claim, obliging Tupolev pay 5.6 billion rubles for unjust enrichment, 556 million rubles in penalties, and 8 million rubles in state duties, altogether worth around $85 million. During the trial, it was revealed that Tupolev had returned the advance it received from Tatneft for the first aircraft, but the funds for the second were never returned. Revealingly, Tupolev blamed the delivery failure on its workload due to state defense orders, which it said account for 85% of production, but only return a profit of about 4%. As a result, the company said it would only be able to conclude new contracts for the Tu-114 after 2027, a massive delay. From the horse's mouth, then, the systemically important company can't cope with the demands of the Russian state, let alone its commercial clients. In addition to the non-delivery of 2 Tu-114s and refurbished Tu-95 and Tu-22M3s, Tupolev has also missed its deadline for delivering new Tu-160Ms. 4 were supposed to be delivered between 2022 and 2023, but the first 2 were only finally delivered at the end of 2025. The remaining units are reportedly still in the works, though no official reason for the delay has been disclosed. But the problems for Tupolev don't end there. A few months after the settlement of the first Tatneft case against it, Tatneft filed a new claim for 11.7 billion rubles, around $115 million. The case is currently ongoing, with Tupolev proposing a partial settlement. In the meantime, for the second time in as many years, United Aircraft Company, or UAC, the corporation that owns Tupolev, has reshuffled Tupolev's leadership. Company head Alexander Bobryshev, 76, was replaced by 37-year-old Yuri Ambrosimov, the grandson of Yuri Litvinov, who headed KAZ in the 90s, and previously the company's deputy director for finance and economics. Although UAC claimed that Bobryshev was leaving his post after completing the task assigned to him for the supply of military equipment under the state defense order, in all likelihood, the head change is a direct result of these lawsuits and ongoing delivery issues. UAC told TASS that the main task of the new managers will be the implementation of the growing production program, as well as the implementation of plans for the Tu-114 program. Despite these assurances, the delivery shortfalls raise uncomfortable questions about Russia's capacity to sustain and expand its strategic aviation fleet amid ongoing military operations. In October, the head of Tatarstan, Rustam Minikhanov, announced that the main industrial facilities for mass production of two Tu-140 passenger airliners would be commissioned this year, although whether this project helps relieve the backlog and how long that might take are still open questions. In the meantime, Alpha Group's strikes only exacerbate the issues with Russian military aviation. As per the SBU's report on its activities during 2025, the 15 Russian aircraft it destroyed included 11 fixed-wing combat aircraft of the Su-30SM, Su-34, Su-27, Su-24 and MiG-31 varieties, along with 3 Mi-8, Mi-26 and Mi-28 helicopters and 1 AN-26 transport aircraft. Interestingly, they didn't include the damaged Tu-95 and Tu-22 M3 bombers from Operation Spiderweb in their tally. Perhaps that's because the operation also involved other sectors of the Ukrainian military, and they only wanted to claim hits that were entirely of their own doing. The destroyed aircraft represent a cross-section of Russia's core tactical and operational aviation fleet, covering air superiority, strike, interception, transport, and rotary wing support roles. The loss of Su-30SMs directly degrades Russia's ability to combine air defense and offensive aviation operations within a single platform, while the loss of Su-34s, Russia's primary frontline bombers, means fewer Fab Glide bombs raining down. While the Su-27s and Su-24s are outdated and largely perform ancillary roles, such as escorting strike aircraft, MiG-31 interceptors play a strategic role in Russia's air defense architecture. Designed to counter high-speed targets such as strategic bombers and cruise missiles, the aircraft is also used as a launch platform for the Kh-47M2 Kinzhal hypersonic missile. However, when it comes to the replacement of its non-Tupolev-produced aircraft, Russia doesn't seem to have anywhere near the same kind of issues as it is with its bombers. According to fresh research by London-based think tank RUSI, Russia has taken delivery of at least 135 new fighters during the war, including 55 to 60 Su-35s, 20 of its new supposedly stealthy Su-57, up to 50 Su-34Ms, and 20 to 25 MiG-31s across variants, with deliveries increasing over time. The RUSI report disputes the official Ukrainian figure of over 400 downed Russian aircraft during the war, estimating the figure to be closer to 130 fixed-wing aircraft either shot down or badly damaged. If they're correct, Russia's fighter force is still a long way off being reduced to a critical level by Ukrainian strikes. Indeed, if you take Putin at his word, where's the problem? In late December, he claimed that since February 2022, Russia had boosted the production of arms and ammunition by 22 times. Tank production had grown 2.2 times, military aircraft 4.6 times, electronic warfare equipment 12.5 times, and rocket artillery weapons 9.6 times, while production of strike weapons and ammunition had grown by a whopping 22 times. At least, that's what Putin said in a televised statement at a Kremlin meeting with defense industry officials. Moreover, with the introduction of new advanced long-range weapons like the Oreshnik, Burevestnik, Poseidon and Avangard systems, it's debatable whether Russia's strategic bombers are quite as important as they once were as a nuclear deterrent. Russian experts like Ruslan Pukov, director of the Center for Analysis of Strategies and Technologies, are already questioning whether Russia should persist with old-school military technologies like tanks and bombers. He essentially argues that much cheaper, more advanced weapons like FPV drones have made these systems too vulnerable and cost-ineffective, and so they should be scrapped and the focus shifted entirely to modern weapons like missiles and drones. It would certainly be a cruel irony if, by destroying Russia's older capabilities, Ukraine only hastened the introduction of much nastier tech. Still, it's probably only a matter of time before Alpha Group starts striking those systems as well. We'll of course keep you updated with developments, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out. Thanks for watching.